Everyone. Welcome. I'm Kiara, co-founder of Startup ROI. Today we are talking about gaining the right feedback. Oops, sorry about that echo. Okay. Today we're talking about gaining the right feedback during product testing and beta testing. And we have a guest today, Vesna. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself in just a moment. My team is also here. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves? No? Any? Kelly, Cheryl, Paul's here, my co-founder, Paul.
I didn't want to step on anyone. I'm Cheryl Parks. I head up sales for Startup ROI. Super excited to be here and just learn and share.
Awesome.
Hi, Paul Claxton. So I'm Kiara Thomas's co-founder. Feel free to ask me any questions. If you're curious about my background, go to paulclaxton.io. See you on the show here.
Awesome.
Hey guys, I'm the little leprechaun from Ireland. You'll find me in the comments. I'm VP of People at Startup ROI. So anything to do with people, I'm your gal.
Awesome. Okay. And Vesna, I know you are gearing up and ready to get started. Before I let you introduce yourself and jump in, I do want to make sure I mention you guys need to know about our contest that's happening. If you don't know already, we have a capital raising contest for AI startups. So your best pitch deck, whomever the winner is going to gain some live recognition. You get a mini course to help you know what needs to go in your pitch deck, how you need to pitch to investors. It's really great, very informative. And you get our startup community, which is for founders, like-minded people. So I believe that is already in the comments. You guys click on the links within the comments so that you can make sure you take advantage of that. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's go to Vesna. She's awesome. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Kira. Nice to be here and meet everybody. So I'm Vesna Leonard. I guess I'll start by kind of introducing myself. It might be a little bit of a long intro, but it will tie into testing and methodologies and that because it's kind of based on the history and what I've seen. So I am also feel free to jump in if anybody's got any questions or anything right now. As I'm talking, I do better with collaborating than just talking at people. But that being said, co-founder and co-CEO of QA Works For You QA software testing services. Been doing it for 14 years now, but I've been in the industry much longer. I will not say how long. But I started as a QA tester when I was in university for my first co-op job. I was hired originally, I was a mathematics student and was hired as a dev to code, which I did not know how to do back in those days. So they told me to go off and test and figure out how to do testing processes. This is before the internet, so I had to go to a library. I figured out how to do that, put in processes in place, and really worked with the team and the business and the customers to understand what the needs were in order to understand what to test. It wasn't just a matter of testing the functionality that was kind of being spat out. So I did that for a bit, really fell in love with it, did a few co-op terms on that. And then after university was hired as a developer, which I thought, okay, I could do this. But again, spun my wheels constantly and had a really hard time pushing anything out because I would look at everything from a million different angles. I spent a lot of time with customer support. I think we did once or twice a week, we would tour with customer support and we would see the pains that the customers were dealing with that didn't tie into what the business thought they were building. And when those miscommunications happen, I needed to understand what the real problems were and what we were trying to solve in order to understand what we need to test. So it became more than just about testing at that point. And it was a lot more kind of customer focused, and as well as tying into what the business needs are and what the whole team is trying to create. One example of this, I'm still kind of introing myself, but I'm leading into other stuff. But one example of this was a company I worked with, I don't know if I can say their name, but it's a budgeting software that I worked with a long time ago. And I love them because it was personal budgets and they were helping people kind of get out of debt. And it was a very personal thing that they were doing. They're going to kill me, but it's not it was almost like a glorified spreadsheet. I mean, it's a little more than that, but what they provided as a service with their customer support, as well as how thoughtfully they built their software, really helped people kind of get out of debt, no matter how small their budget was, and just look at money in a more efficient manner. And that's kind of what I love about QA, is just the efficiency of just trying to get as efficient as possible and staying away from bugs and wasting money on all of that. So I really thought that was neat. And we did work with customer support every now and again. And one of the stories I heard was a few times they had people call in and who were suicidal because they really had a lot of issues. And the customer support people would help them and walk them through building the budget and using the software. And the one thing I found was any small, I guess, complication, I don't want to call them bugs, but complication to the user would kind of set off a lot of emotional issues, because we're talking about their family budget, we're talking about their livelihoods, right? So you might not think it's a bug, but it's really having a very negative effect on the individual who's using it. And of course, that's B2C, so that's a little bit different. But it really highlighted for me that we're not just kind of building functionality. We're not just building a software. We're building something that humans are using, and that has sometimes a very, deep emotional tie to the human who is using it. And that could also happen in B2B, because people who purchase B2B software are purchasing it and putting their careers and their life on the line when they purchase it. They might not be the ones who are making the decision to actually buy it and put the funds behind it, but it's still an emotional purchase that they're doing. So understanding those needs, tying into what you're building, then ties into what you're testing and why you're testing and what quality even means. So I think to your point, Kara, of at the very beginning, I think I'm just going to try and find your quote here where you said about helping with beta testing and product testing and quality and all that. That all completely depends on what you're building, who you're building it for, and what job they're buying your product for to fill, right? So a lot of that comes from understanding all these other things and understanding kind of the soft skill parts and the human interactions of the software. Should I pause or should I keep going?
You can pause. I have a question. So I think quality might be your favorite word, because you say it often. You say it often, and in our previous conversation also. How do you define it? If you had to give it a definition or an explanation, how would you define it?
All right, well, as ambiguous as I always am, I can't. I depend on others to define it. And even within, whether it's a small startup of 2 people or a larger startup or even a corporation, quality is different for each person. It's different for the salesperson because they are motivated by different things. It's different for the designer, it's different for the PMs, for the developers, for the customers. And people like designers and QA have to see all of that in order to understand what they're doing. But that being said, everybody having a different definition of quality, that's kind of the biggest thing is the communication of what quality is across the org needs to match with each group or each type of person. It's easier as a smaller startup because we work with startups as small as 1 through to like 50, 100, 150. And we see the changes as they grow and the knowledge stays with the original core people. It doesn't continue very well. I mean, it does for some, but not always. And then you lose what quality means. Now you've got other people coming in from other places and their vision of quality or what they think you're building or they're building is different from what was originally intended, is different from why the customer is buying. That's such a hard question. But I guess it comes down to communication and everybody being on the same page of what does quality mean for us, right? So
would you say there's, okay, would you say there's levels of quality? So maybe there's a mindset you should have about quality as you're entering the market. Then there is another mindset you should have regarding quality as maybe you're selling to a larger customer.
yes. So if you are, because if you're selling to, I'm just trying to think of an example. I can't right now. If you're selling to a smaller customer, their needs are going to be different. I had an example. It was gone. Even for the budgeting software, for example, the needs of like if you were going to sell that to a B2B, the needs of the individual doing a budget for themselves or their family is going to be very different than the needs of the small business or even the larger business purchasing that software. And so you're going to want to think about what quality is for these two. I've got my example now for these two different spaces. And I think I might have mentioned it to you as well, the whole steak pizza thing. So Jobs to Be Done is a framework of trying to understand who's buying what you're selling, why they're buying. And it's not a matter of just kind of asking them why they bought it, because with that whole Henry Ford thing, they're going to tell you they need a faster horse. But Ford sees, no, you need faster transportation. Let me do that for you, kind of thing. So asking them, they just see the problem. You're the one who's supposed to come up with a solution and teach them about it. So that being said, steak and pizza are both, this comes from Jobs to Be Done as an example. They're both foods. You hire them for two different reasons. You're not going to hire a pile of steaks for a 9-year-old's birthday party in the backyard, right? That's a whole, they're both food, right? But they do two completely different jobs. And steak, of course, for a nice or romantic dinner, you're not going to be ordering in some pizza and maybe you are, I don't know, but you know what I'm trying to get at. It is very different. And quality wise, if you're looking at those two, but also marketing wise, you're marketing very differently to those two people, but you're also testing very differently. I'm not going to sit and test steak and pizza in the same way. Maybe some things are going to overlap. Can I chew it easily? Can I digest it? I don't know, this is going off the rails here, but it's going to be different. I don't need cutlery necessarily for a pizza, but maybe I can use plastic cutlery if I want to, versus I can't use plastic cutlery for a steak. So you have to know who you're selling to, how they're using it. They're two different testing processes, two different measurements that you're going to use for quality for those two different types of food and the people who are consuming them. Literally.
That is the best example. That was a great example. I love it. I love it. Okay, so pizza and steak.
Yes.
And I also like the practicality of that. Just okay, so now we don't need cutlery for pizza. What do we need?
Yeah.
And being able to shape your questions around that. I like that a lot. Does anyone else have questions? Because I feel like this may be a good point for you to go into your notes. But does anyone else have anything?
I don't have a question. I just have to applaud that explanation. As everybody in our team knows that I'm neurodiverse, so information when it's coming to me is processed slightly differently. So metaphors and stories and practical explanations really help. So thank you for that.
No problem. I can't take credit for it. I also, I go to a conference every year that I think is full of very similar people to you and I, and metaphors are huge, and jobs to be done people were the ones who kind of came up with that one. And that's when I was like, aha, okay, I get it now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just wanted to chime in and say, it's very similar to what's happening in the sales world, because, you know, you can't just give general pitches. You actually have to understand what someone's looking for, how they are going to get to the outcome. So there's a tail end of this as well. And it just feeds so beautifully into it. And I'm a foodie, so it's just,
Yeah,
yeah, thanks.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, are you ready to dive in? I know you have some things to share, some notes
Yeah.
to share.
Absolutely, absolutely.
great.
Yeah, so the whole sales thing too, I want to kind of, I'm following my notes still, but I do want to go into that. That is huge because we've started working with sales and pre-sales. We've started working when they're writing up the SOWs. We QA people in the group that I work with, design, like everything kind of shift left at the beginning, so that not only do we understand it, but in meetings, we might not have anything to do. We will notice miscommunication between what we heard in pre-sales, what we're seeing in sales, what we're seeing in design, and what the customer is complaining about. And then, so part of that kind of came from, like, we've worked with probably close to 100 companies, and I'm starting to see a lot of similar patterns over the last 4 years specifically. And a lot of times when we're working directly with developers, you know, they're going on the Jira ticket, and I'm reading it, and there's very little information sometimes, or too much information, but the wrong information. And then you look at the story, you look at, or you look at the ticket, you look at what they've built, then you go back and you look at the story, then you ask the designer, then you ask the salesperson, and you're like, something was missing. So it's all a human thing, right? There's a miscommunication along the line, and everybody thinks the right thing is being done, but everyone's got their own version of the quality or the right thing. But then it falls on me to test it, and then the devs are blamed for, throwing out bugs when they're not really bugs, they're human miscommunications. I mean, we do find bugs, but a lot of times that pattern is really, it's really obvious now to me more than anything. And so understanding that, I think I started looking at more whole company quality. But yeah, I guess kind of back to my intro, I started working with startups. I live in the town where RIM and BlackBerry was kind of based. And then when they shut down and did all their layoffs, a ton of new startups kind of came from that. And I was working in a bit of a corporate environment at that point, and just watched all of this happen. And I'm not sure if I've been diagnosed as neurodiverse, but I love shiny things. So anything new and exciting I was into, and I was talking to these young people doing their startups and the struggles that they were going through. And basically I was doing kind of what I'm doing here, is just helping them understand, again, it was a little more raw back then, but who they're selling to, what they're building, what quality means for them. And then just pairing with them, pairing with the developers, pairing with the CEOs or CTOs to kind of, I don't know, mentor them or coach them into, this is how I would look at it, and just give them a different view, kind of outside their tunnel vision. And eventually through that, they started asking me, for kind of help and services, and we grew from there. It's not what I meant to do, but we grew from that, helping them. And now that's kind of what we do. And I'm really passionate about it because you get a lot of testers that I talk to. A lot happen to be from corporate situations, from large companies where everything's very structured and methodical, and you kind of do the same thing over and over again, right? And I've seen these people, you know, brought into smaller startups, not only them, but PMs and you name it. They have a really hard time shifting to this fast pace. But that's not how we did it last week. Well, yeah, this week's a new week and we're going to do things differently. Quality's different this week. The market's different this week. It's being able to kind of keep up with that. So when I look for testers, I actually look for people without a testing background, but who have that mentality and that ability to shift, look for inefficiencies, and are uncomfortable with, you know, miscommunications and want to kind of help that. It's kind of like being a mom, I guess. It's weird. So yeah, I think setting up those processes, thinking about those, you don't even have to set them up at a small startup stage, but having that stuff in mind, and being agile. You know, I come from originally waterfall. Agile is great, and I've seen it work really, really well. I have also seen it fail dramatically. But again, I think that all comes to this whole communication thing, where you can want change. I'm going to say as an example from the quality perspective, where you talk to the engineering manager and the two of you are aligned on what kind of change you want, but then the rest of the organization has different perspectives and different things in mind, and you can't enable that change. You can't make it happen from that level if it's not across the board. So coming back to the point, quality is everyone's business. It's huge. Man, I think I covered all of this in my ramblings earlier, so I'm just trying to go through it. So that's kind of our methodology. Isn't really a methodology per se. It's more of just organically thinking about the things we were just talking about. And it changes, obviously, depending on your industry, depending on what you're building, who your customers are, all these things that I've mentioned. And then that leads to, okay, how do we test? Are we focused on penetration testing? Are we focused on, security? Are we focused on actual usability? All these things require these earlier understandings and questions about your entire organization, what you're trying to build and put together. I'm just trying to go through. So we talked about stakeholders and everybody, kind of what quality means to all these different people. Little questions that you can kind of ask. One thing, honestly, if anybody is interested, they really should look at the Jobs to Be Done framework. I have no affiliation there. It's just, they really help me put all these things that I've seen over the years together. And being able to actually ask the customers and interview them to find out why they bought and how they're using is fabulous. Also sitting with the customers and watching them use it. Not saying anything, just watching them will blow your mind, because they are not doing what you think they are, ever. And then that will, you take notes, and that's the end of it. And that will really help you kind of discover, what am I building? Why am I building it? We really didn't need those 10 buttons over here. We didn't need, to save that data over here. We need this other stuff. That really comes from that, from observing that, and not just asking them. So things that you want to discover. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this as a company? Why are you doing this as an individual? Why are the customers doing this? Why are they using what you're building? What are you trying to solve as a business? What are they trying to solve? Buying your product, does it align? What are you even building? Again, does that align? Question of, what does quality mean to you, your customers, your stakeholders? How does your team communicate? That's huge. I can really go deep into that off of some experiences I've had, but we've been remote since 2009, and watching non-remote people go remote in the last few years has been interesting, because people continue to communicate the way, or try to communicate the way they did in an office. Very siloed, you know, standing at someone's desk or at a water cooler or whatever. Very different. But if you look at people who worked remotely in the beginning, before all of this, the communication style is very different. In Slack, for example, everything is open. Questions are asked in open channels. There are no back channel communications unless it's something personal, or, you know what I mean? Every question is asked all the time in a very organized manner, but enough that anyone can answer and everyone sees what's going on. So everyone's in tune with what all parts of the org are seeing and understanding. That's one example for communication, but alignment and communication is so super important. And again, I think that's individual based on the company. But if you don't have that, you're going to have problems. A lot of bugs that I find come down to that and solely that. And it's a bit nerve-wracking because I hear devs being blamed a lot, you know, and it really just comes down to communicating and making sure you've got all that. So I can't stress communication enough. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's it. So that's basically, wow, it was a lot longer when I wrote it out. So I think that's the crux of it. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'd love for you to maybe go more in depth on the practicality of discovery. So what insights to gather, maybe give an example of a situation where you, you know, how you uncovered bugs, or if you discovered a bug, you know, go a little bit deeper into the discovery process, because our startups they're beginning beta testing. I had a startup ask me, what am I even supposed to find out? You know, what are my insights, the insights I'm supposed to be gathering? So I'd love just the practical, just maybe an example or two of what they should be looking for.
Okay, so in that case specifically, do they have beta testers? Are they doing their own beta testing?
They're doing their own, more than likely.
They're doing their own. Okay, so I'm just going to ask more questions. So would they be dog fooding so would they be using their own software for example, for the budgeting software? Would they be using their own software for budgeting their own budget? Or are they just kind of testing it, trying to think like an end user? Or both?
So they're getting user feedback
Okay.
on their actual MVP.
Okay.
So the user going through their product and they're gathering feedback.
Okay, so they're not testing it themselves, the users are testing them and they're gathering the feedback from it. Okay. What are they trying to find? So again, that's individual based on what their product is and how they're collecting feedback, right? Like what are they asking? Is it just kind of a free-for-all and the user just gives them whatever? Maybe they need to look at, I don't know how it's structured. Maybe they need to look at structuring their beta testing and think about these questions that I mentioned. Okay, and even if they don't have the right answer for it, like let's start with why are we building this? And write that out. This is top of my head stuff. So write that out. Why are we building this? I don't know, 5 points or whatever. And this is why, and this is why people are going to buy it. And this is the problem that it's solving, etc. Gather the feedback. If it's just kind of open-ended feedback and it's not like specific questions that they're answering or fields that they're filling in, go through it and just loosely match it to each of those, let's say 5 points that you had written out as to why you're building this thing. How does it match? What does it look like? If at all possible, I would watch the beta users actually use it, if it's possible. Have them narrate, or even they can do videos and narrate as they're going along, narrate their frustrations, narrate their questions. What the heck is this field? What does this do? Why am I doing this? And just do that. Something like that is more useful than written feed for me anyway. But again, it depends on what your product is, right? So maybe you can't do that. Maybe it's not a product where that's possible. But examples like that, where you want that information and you want to see what they're doing, that will give you information as to, you know, what you're trying to solve, and if what you build actually solves that and kind of crosses that bridge. And you'll see patterns, and you'll start to see, you know, what you thought it was, what they think it is. Is that it's still very loosey-goosey, right? But it's hard when it's not, because it's so different for each product, right? Did that answer that?
Yeah, it helps. It helps. So a couple of things that I've seen, just startups from the stage. So I've seen kind of the join our login, kind of have at it, and complete a survey afterwards.
Okay.
So they're gathering information that way. Another thing that I've seen is the no survey, but just log in, and then there's kind of I think they're able to track what people are clicking on.
Okay.
But not necessarily, there's no survey per se. So just throwing out some examples. How would you say they should improve that process in order to be able to collect the best feedback possible?
So survey wise, you know, again, I don't know how they wrote it out, what they decide, like whatever they decided on, how they decided on what to ask. But it's from their perspective. And maybe from the answers, like send out the survey once, take a look at it. And from the answers, you might need to tweak it. You might need to, maybe you're asking the wrong questions. Maybe your survey needs, you know, to be tweaked a bit to give you what you want. But you have to find that, I think, from the first set of answers, second set of answers, and just keep iterating on it. I've taken such surveys, and a lot of times there's so many times where there's responses that I want to put in that, like, there's no checkbox for it. There's no option for it at all. So maybe leaving every single question with a text or something that they can actually give you more information and details about. Even if it goes off on a tangent, it'll give you more than them just checking a default box that might not apply at all to them. And then you think you're getting data, but you're not, because I've done that so many times. And that's huge. So if that's how you're doing it, I would definitely leave space for them to answer questions or to write text and offer information that way. Watching them click around is great. If it's at all possible, having them narrate is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, that would be my first thing. If that's even possible, that would help immensely. Yeah, and so I'm just trying to think of another way to improve. I mean, I've seen people invite their beta testers to Discords or Slacks where they can talk to each other and communicate and share their pains or their joys or whatever in there, so that you can see in real time what the problems are. I'm sure there are other tools. I'm just throwing out Slack and Discord because they're top on my list. But I'm trying to think of what else I've seen out there for that. Beta testers, like we're talking about smaller startups, so you might not have customer support, but you have someone there who is in contact with the customers. You might want them collaborating with them directly. I don't know if that's possible, but that's also much better than just a survey. Anything where you can observe or at least be a part of the human interaction with it, I think it'd be better than a survey. But if you're going to do one, leave it open for them to babble, leave it open for them to give you as much info as possible.
Absolute worst questions to ask while testing.
What's the worst question to ask while testing? Wow.
Yep.
And worst question, like the tester shouldn't ask it, or
This is so good versus bad. This is a good way to ask this type of question versus this way really sucks.
I don't know. Why the heck did you make it that way? I don't know. What was that? You're on mute.
I popped off mute and then went back on. Sorry.
That's
I feel
okay.
like I'm going to give some context. I feel like asking leading questions is like a bad way to ask a question, right? So just to give some context, because just from the sales side, like that doesn't help if I'm leading you to my answer. So I'm guessing it might be the same. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's good. That's good. A question that, the leading questions definitely, and I've seen that. You want to take away your own assumptions. You want to take away your own bias and all the rest of that stuff, which is hard. It's hard to see it all the time. But also, why the heck did you build it that way or whatever? Attacking questions like that. The way that we do testing, the way that we do quality is partnering. We want to make what the devs do better. We want to make the business look better. We're not there to butt heads. And that's part of the reason why I just stopped working for others and for larger corporations, is it was always an us versus them, QA versus development. And I've watched development hide new functionality from QA all the time because they didn't want to get in trouble, right? So there's a lot of that really, really horrible attitude coming through, and leading questions is definitely part of that. That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty huge.
Okay, so what are some tools that you've seen and that you prefer? Maybe that someone in an early stage could use while testing.
For testing. So I deal mostly with manual testing and processes. So it's not so much of a tool, it's more of a methodology, and it's exploratory testing where you're not following anything scripted. So if you were to write a bunch of test cases, all of us here would follow the steps of the test cases and always come out with the same answer, right? With the same bug, with the same non-bug, whatever. If I were to say, using some sort of, I guess, Gherkin speak, is as a user, after logging in, I want to do this, this, and this, and that's it. You take that and you explore it. I'm going to do it on my iPad. You're going to do it on your Android phone. Someone else is going to do it on their Windows machine, or someone's going to do it in Firefox versus Chrome, whatever. And I'll, maybe if I'm on a computer, I'll use my mouse pad, or I'll use an actual mouse, or I'll use shortcuts. We're all going to do it in different ways based on how we use it. I might be clicking the back button, or hitting escape. Like there's just so many different ways of, and these are mild, but we all use software very differently, and you can't script every single one of these. You also can't automate every single one of these, right? So exploratory testing sessions where everyone's kind of doing the same basic task without being told how to do it. Now you're going to come up with a variety of different ways, even in-house, without having to go out to beta testers and that kind of thing. So we've done things like testing parties or test bashes where the entire company, under 10 or whatever, or even groups in larger companies will get together and test before a release, just to suss all of this out. So that's not quite a tool, but it is a method that it's amazing, and it's very powerful. Other tools, if you're going to do as the product grows, it's going to get more complicated, and it's going to be more difficult to keep track of all the different sections and the pages and where things lead. So you need kind of workflows. You want to write out workflows that you want the user to use, or that the user wants to use. Testing those would be great, then automating them using something like Cypress. But you need to keep track of them. So you can keep track of them there's a bunch of plugin tools for Jira. X-Ray, I think, is one of them. There's another one. There's quite a few of them, but it depends on how deep you want to go. A lot of them have too many bells and whistles for startups. So I'll use things like TestPad. It's almost like a spreadsheet, but it has a little better functionality of writing test cases very quickly. Then you can just turn those light test cases, not heavy steps or anything. Then you can turn those into workflows and turn them into automation, things like that. I think outside of that, I wouldn't use much tooling for smaller startups. I think you can get away with it even under 50 people for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so I've been asking you questions about very early stage. So how about kind of more so post-launch, they're beginning to see traction, and they start to experience bugs, tons of them. How do they overcome situations like that? What is, I guess, the best way to resolve those issues? And yeah, some examples maybe.
Resolve the plethora of bugs. So the thing that I see the most is people will automatically say they need more testing, or they need their developers to code better. And I honestly think it goes back to, are you all aligned? Take a look at the communication. There's not much overhead in that. Take a day to just figure out, right? Look at the bugs. Is there anything they have in common? Are they coming from a specific part of the code base? Are they coming from a specific developer? But why? Maybe that individual or those individuals don't have the information that they need. Like, have an honest conversation. We're not pointing fingers. We're trying to figure out why this is happening. But it might not even have to do with that individual. It might have to do with what's happened before that. There needs to be communication around that, right? So I can't sit here and say, like, it's a very general, I guess, question, because I can't sit here and say, well, this is why, this is the one reason, or these couple reasons why these bugs are happening, right? So it has to be that maybe it wasn't enough information in the specs. Maybe there weren't any specs at all. Maybe, again, that comes down to communication. And I would just say the team needs to sit down, and discuss, especially the engineering team first, but then bring other stakeholders into it to make sure that everybody is aligned on it. Examples, I have many of them, and they all honestly come down to exactly the same thing. We'll get the person at the very end in customer support asking, why did we do this when the customer didn't want that functionality or didn't want it that way. And then it comes down to 3 months ago, it was written up differently than what the customer wanted, especially when it's kind of more enterprise and it's custom, right? Like that's when those problems really happen quite a bit. And then whoever wrote the SOW, whoever agreed to it, had nothing to do with the timelines that the engineering department had. Again, communication. So that's the first place I would start, is what does communication look like? How are we passing down this information, and is everybody aligned with it?
So let's say, again, same scenario, plethora of bugs. What is the prioritization method look like for actually resolving these issues?
Right. Okay, so then that comes down to what is, as much as quality, what is priority for the business, right? If your priority is based on whatever print job comes from whatever's been inputted into, I'm very simplistically thinking about just something easy, and nothing's being sent to print, that's a massive priority. It's a massive fail. That's all you do and it's not working. That's priority one. And that's what you need to look at, is what is stopping your product from functioning the way you think it's supposed to, and what's stopping the end user from doing whatever they hired your product to do. And those are the ones that you need to attack first and take a look at, where are the issues. After that, you prioritize much the same, but more based on, is it interfering with, the job that they're trying to do as an end user? Is it interfering with, are we not getting payments, because our payment screen isn't working or whatever? That's huge. Then we're missing out on, we're shipping out all this, whatever, these shoes or whatever we're selling through our platform, but we're not getting paid for it. So how can we resolve that? Like, that's also massive priority. So you just prioritize based on, again, business needs and customer needs. And I find that interesting you say that. In smaller groups where developers, have autonomy, which is awesome, but they'll eventually, after enough time, they'll prioritize based on what they think is priority without checking in with other stakeholders, right? Again, communication. So how are they prioritizing things? Why are they prioritizing things this way? And let's align, again, the message across the board so that they know. Have bug scrub meetings, right? With what's it called? It's like the three musketeers. So you have the three main stakeholders. So you've got a developer, you've got, I don't even remember who they are, but the designer, possibly the PM, maybe, and maybe an exec, something like that, more than three, just so everybody's aligned as to, what is being made as priority one, priority two, priority three. And then you also have to talk about that in the beginning. I've seen some places actually outline very strictly what a priority one bug is. And if it doesn't meet this criteria, that's not it. And then a priority two bug, if it doesn't meet that criteria, that's not it. I'm trying to think if there's other ways or other things that I've seen people do to prioritize their bugs. P1, P2, P3 is usually it. Then there's like showstoppers that's it. We're not focusing on anything else. But yeah, just working on the backlog and making sure you have your weekly meetings to kind of scrub those bugs and to make sure that they're prioritized. But it's not just one person's job to do it. And QA should probably be in on that as well, actually.
You're doing an awesome job. I know my questions are are frying, but I do have another one. So, what is the cadence? I know this is again gonna depend upon context, but what does the cadence look like for kind of a good method for maintaining the software, for ensuring that it has as few bugs as possible, that it can meet the capacity of the traction and volume that it has.
You need to do integration testing. So that new functionality that you introduce. Yeah, it's bigger. So new functionality you introduce doesn't change anything or doesn't inadvertently break something else along the way, but then that all ties into a lot of development processes and how the engineering department functions. Do we have staging? Do we have environments where we can do these tests? Do they have reliable data? Is the data similar to what's in production? I've seen things like having a QA server, a staging server. A lot of times we've pair tested with developers as soon as they finish coding on their environment, and then we'll test again in a staging environment or a QA environment. And yet again, in some of the really best places I've worked is we will have a production environment that toggles new functionality. So you toggle it on for yourself when you log in, and then you can test it with live data, with proper information, turn it off so that nobody else sees it, that kind of thing. There's different ways of doing it. I'm really a fan of feature toggles in production now. When I first saw that probably 4 or 5 years ago, I lost my mind. I'm like, I cannot test in production. I'm going to break everything. It's on fire. It's horrible. But right now, I think it's beautiful. But you do need a few different things between there. And I believe that the best, from what I've seen, the best outcomes I've seen were pair testing with developers as they're developing. Their mind is already in that functionality. They're already there. If they just toss that over the fence and start working on something else while I'm testing, now when I break something, they have to get out of what they were doing, go back into that mindset. That context switching is a huge problem. That's actually a good answer to what we've been talking about along with communication. Is context switching is massive. Whether it's being interrupted to go to a meeting, whether it's being interrupted to sign an SOW or review this or talk to this guy or get on the phone with a customer, that's horrible. Developers need that time. They need that, not just them, but others as well, but they need that time to be in there and to just focus on that. So pair testing with them while they're doing that keeps them in that focused mindset, and less things to break and to you know what I mean, to lose track of. And then I can test in my environment after, think of my own things, and then we can collaborate, then throw it out into production, feature toggles. And then even again, it's not always possible with each product, right? But even things like beta testing, where you're just putting it out to 10 people for a while and having a great relationship with them and having feedback from them all the time. And then, rolling it out to a few more and a few more and a few more. But again, depends on who your clients are and or customers are, and if you're able to do that. Hope I didn't go off on a tangent.
Beautiful. Great answer. Does anyone else have questions? No.
I don't, but I just want to say this is just unfolding so beautifully. And I can completely see how it plugs into when you go to market and sales and all the things that you really have to reverse engineer, so to speak. And so whether your idea was an inspiration or it was a problem in the market that you saw, we're all connected. I think that's the bottom line, is we are all connected. So it's important to go forward knowing that. And I love the examples you're using around communication, because most of what we buy isn't for functionality, it's for things like reliability and gaining confidence in something, right? I mean, Global, they market based on reliability. Like, you don't have to worry, the crash dummy, right? Safety and reliability, so things like that. So I'm just loving this conversation.
Awesome. You're right. You're right on that. Like, it's definitely reliability, and it's more based on, yeah, like the individual and what they're kind of trying to do. But there's a whole emotional story leading up to that decision to actually purchase. And I watched, I'm going to go back to it, but I watched a whole Jobs to Be Done interview. There's quite a few of them. And someone actually did one on me, and they swore, they're like, I'm not going to make you cry. It was all about business. At the end of it, it comes down to something in kindergarten. I'm like, this is why I do what I do. Right. And it was messed up. Right. And you can just link to it. Well, what were you feeling that day? What was the weather like? Why did you decide to purchase? And you're like, well, because I think the one that I watched was in the UK, and it was about a car that was purchased. And the gentleman was sitting there saying, yeah, I bought a car, and this is why I bought it. And we had the money for it. So I picked it up. And the interviewers kind of walked him. There was like an hour and a bit interview, and they walked him through it. And the whole thing just leads to his wife picked up golfing. Then he started golfing. Then they needed to fit the golf clubs somewhere, but it didn't fit the vehicle they had. And like all over like a 4 or 5 year period until he purchased that particular car to solve a whole bunch of problems, which at the beginning was that him and his wife weren't spending time together. Like, it's messed up, right? It all just comes down to, but it's not even just that. It's things that you do in the corporate world. It's everything. It's B2B, B2C. It's absolutely everything. And the connections are just, once you get in there and really see it, it's like the Matrix. You can't unsee it. It's wild. So that's why I can never answer a question straight on, because I'm like, there's so many factors that I don't know. I can't answer your question.
Awesome. Awesome. Kelly, did you have any questions?
No questions, but just like you guys, I'm really enjoying this conversation. Again, I love that story. When you were telling that story, the golf, and it turns out that it was like they didn't spend enough time together, but he originally thought, oh, I just had money and time to buy the car, which wasn't the case. And that's why it's so important, to kind of like, as you keep saying about communication as well, within any spectrum, communication joins the dots. It's like when you're engineering, if something breaks and you're like, oh, I have to throw this out. No, I don't have to throw this out. I just have to take my steps backwards, see where it broke down, and connect the dots again. So I love the way you explain things, Vesna. I can tell you, I'm not allowed to swear on here, but you know your stuff.
Don't start, because I'm bad with swearing, and I'll just go off with you.
Well, I'm Irish and female, so I think I win.
I'm Serbian, and we're very similar. I'm married to
Oh
someone.
dear. Oh, this would just be a conversation of F's and B's and flying.
It would be. It would
Oh,
be.
brilliant.
It's funny because you now reminded me too, communication wise, how many times I've been in meetings debugging what people are saying in the meetings, using terminology. Oh God, I wish I had an example. Okay, this isn't a good example because it didn't happen at work, but I did see a video yesterday or today about a mom teaching her young daughters about kind of budgeting and spending money and whatever. And so she was going through, the little girl was going through, why do I have to pay rent when I'm starting to rent a place? Why am I paying for first and last month's rent? I didn't live here last month. But the mother continued talking And I had to like rewind so I could hear it. The mother continued talking, saying, well, that's what they asked for. They asked for last month's rent. So the mother's idea of last month's rent was, as we know, the end of the term that you're living with, you get that month back for free. But the girl took it as like last month, right? So right there, they're having a discussion on two completely different things, and neither of them saw that they weren't talking about the same thing. I cannot tell you how many times that happens in Slack, in meetings, that I have to now deconstruct and say, okay, this person means this, this, and this, and this person means this, this, and this. It happens so much. And you don't, the problem is you can't figure that out because you both think you're talking about the same thing. And then issues come up from that. And I don't even know how to solve that other than let me sit in. I don't know how to do that. Right. And so I'm very in tune with that because I am, I was born and raised in Canada, but my family's Serbian and we were very ESL in the household for the first, 5-6 years. And I'm very in tune with what do you really mean? Right. And it's hard to even figure that out when you both think you're talking about the same thing. And that's why even like watching people do something on a video, like when I write up bugs, I have to include screenshots and a video. Developers will notice things that I didn't notice on the screen, and they now see where the bug is coming from that I didn't notice and I wouldn't put in a write-up, right? Things like that are glaring for them that I completely missed, but also things that they would miss if they were just reading it because their screen looks different, or they're not looking at, they're on a different server or whatever. These things are all, again, miscommunications. Like they're not bugs. Does that make sense? I could go on.
It makes perfect sense.
Learning abilities as well. Like, you have your visual learner, you have your audio learner. So you've just explained that really well as well, because it's like, and I think people need to get better at asking questions. Sometimes when they're in discussions and their best friend is the developer next to them and they've created this thing, and the best friend thinks, oh, I don't know how I can say this to you without it coming across like I'm saying you're doing it wrong. But they need to kind of get out of their own way and sort of go, okay, so this is what I think it is, and this is what I think you're telling me. Am I right? Or is it something completely different? So it's about perception of what you see or what you hear. So when they get better at that, as I told the girls before, a story that I tell people a lot of the time as well is, so if you think about two ice skaters, or one ice skater and two people watching the ice skater, one person sees this beautiful, female dancing on ice and thinks it's gorgeous. The other person watching the exact same thing is thinking, oh shit, she's going to fall into the ice. So it's about perception, but they're both seeing the same thing, but reading it differently and processing it differently. So again, just communicate what you think you're seeing, communicate what it's supposed to be, and then join the dots. It's like, it's not a book. It's just we're seeing and thinking and hearing different things.
I like that one, because then you could be solving the problem of what if she falls and we need to put an airbag on her on her dress or whatever, and the other person's like, no, we need to make the ice smoother. I don't know, like it's like you're gonna look at different solutions too based on how you're looking at it, right? Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
One thing that I've noticed about myself, so while you were speaking, I wrote down blind spots are everything, right? So we don't know clearly our own blind spots. In my household, I always know when there's a disconnect because the answer to the question is a little bit off. And I'm like, that isn't actually, I see what you're saying, but what you just said is not aligned with the actual question. And that's when I know I have to go, like, we need to like unravel this because you're looking at it differently. And then we can agree to disagree or whatever we're going to do. But that is so active listening and understanding if someone asks a question, it should be aligned with where you're going. And if it's not, then you know there's a perception issue. So I'm so into this conversation.
Yes. Yes. No, I love that. That's beautiful. I honestly think a lot of arguments and fights stem from thinking that they understand you and them thinking that you understand them and vice versa, and I've got 3 boys, I've got 3 kids, and it's just constantly, I'm like, no, he meant this and he meant this. And now you guys can make a decision on this thing here, right? And as they go through their early teens, it doesn't matter how many times you tell them what they meant, they're still right and everybody else is wrong. But hopefully we grow out of that. But you're 100% right on that. It's like, yeah, it is very, and so I go back to ESL. Oh gosh, I wish I had examples now. Again, I shouldn't have even started this, but you say words in different in different parts of the sentence in different languages, right? So like German, for example, I think you say the noun first or something like that, right? So if you were to say things like that in English and then drop some things that would make sense, I don't know why I picked German, but in German, then in English, it would have a completely different meaning. And I think that's how even communication in the same language works. I've said to my husband so many times, it's amazing we can even do anything, because I don't think anybody understands I don't even understand myself, right? Ever. Like it's really, I honestly think that's the crux of like all of it. Not just software, but everything. It's a big rabbit hole.
I'll drop an example here. So a lot of times, it has to do with the freeways, right? Our highway system, whether it's US or across the world, right? So there are, accidents that happen everywhere. And typically that's what gets the focus. But we never talk about the trillions of vehicles that make it to their destinations on time and safely, right? Very rarely, right? We're always almost focused on the bug, so to speak, right? And what didn't go well. So very similar, like with communication, there's so many different forms, freeways, highways, 2-lane roads, all the things. And we don't really focus on when it goes well, but when it goes off the rails, we're just like,
we're all over it.
That's not what I meant. That's not it, right? So yeah, it's very similar, I think, about our highway system.
I like that. I like that. Yes. Oh man, that's wild. Now I'm getting all philosophical. You've got me thinking. This is cool.
Well, guys, we are a little over. The conversation is really great. It's awesome. But I think for our viewers, we're going to need to wrap up. Tell everyone how they can find you and what is the best way to get in touch with you. And we will wrap up.
Okay, cool. Thank you. The best way would either probably be email or LinkedIn. I guess through our website too, that'll come through email, but so my email is Vesna, VESNA @WORX is in X-ray 4YOU.com. And LinkedIn, I'm literally the only Vesna Leonard there. So just type that in and then get me there.
Awesome. Well, Vesna, you've been awesome. So grateful for you taking your time and teaching us about quality Q&A testing. It's been really great, very informative. One more thing that I have to say before I forget to say it is, again, if you don't know about email, I will drop your email actually in our chat.
It's an X. Okay, sorry.
I got you. Well, Cheryl's got you actually. She dropped the email, in the chat so that I had it. Okay, so one more thing that I have to make sure I mention is about our contest, our AI contest that's happening right now. For those of you who are either thinking about raising capital for your AI startup, or you are currently raising and trying to navigate it, I know it's difficult, then go ahead and enter our contest, even if you don't submit your pitch deck because you're nervous. you should at least go through the mini course to help you get a better idea of how to navigate that process. And it's free right now during the time frame of our course. It actually not our course, I'm sorry, the time frame of our contest. So entry closes on July 18th. You guys make sure that you grab everything needed in the link in the comments. I'm pretty sure I dropped it in there. And we will see you in our Slack group. And make sure that you reach out to Vesna because she's awesome, as you can see in this conversation. It was great. Anyone else would like to say as we wrap up?
Just
Vesna,
thank
feel
you
free.
so much. Thank you for this. It was fun. This is great.
I just want to
Definitely.
say thank you. It was amazing. And there were times I saw you thinking and I was thinking to myself, wow, to live in that brain is like, I just literally was like, it was so far reaching and so many layers. So I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you. We have a joke in my family. I have a squirrel running around just chasing one net. It's like nonstop in there. You don't want to be in there. It's a mess.
Thanks, Vesna. Absolutely love this conversation as well. You've given me food for thought a few times as well. So thank you for that. I'd love to spend a day in there.
It would be shocking. No, we all have.
It would be interesting, I can tell you that.
Be a lot of swear words. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so very much.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll be chatting with you again, I'm sure, very soon, Vesna.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.